Welcome everyone to our first seminar on short-term measures. My name is Ludovic Laffineur, Senior Advisor on Shipping Decarbonization at the Global Maritime Forum. I will be the moderator of today's webinar. This session is being recorded and streamed live on LinkedIn. I encourage you to submit questions via the chat and Zoom or through LinkedIn. Today, we will delve into the IMO's short-term regulation, focusing primarily on the carbon intensity indicator, also called the CII. Since January 2023, ships over 5,000 gross tonnage must report their CII. The CII regulation has sparked debate over the accuracy of the AER formula, which is used to calculate the energy efficiency. For those that aren't aware of this formula, you will in a couple of minutes find out how this all works. Stakeholders, mostly ship owners, have called for improvements of the CII regulation to better drive the ship's energy efficiency. Though a review process of the CII regulation was initially planned to close by 2026, this timeline has now been extended. The IMO has faced challenges in developing a formula for ships' operational efficiency, which is influenced by many factors, often beyond the control of the party that operates the ships, going from weather conditions, sea currents, even up to geopolitical tensions or issues. This webinar, hosted by the Global Maritime Forum, seeks to unpack the existing IMO short-term decarbonization measures to increase knowledge sharing on this often overlooked topic. The first half of this webinar will be covered through 3 presentations of each 10 minutes. In this session, we will dive mainly into the short-term measure regulation currently under discussion and its challenges. We'll also examine the role of a multilateral and collaborative approach in this context, both as a tool for meeting regulatory targets and as an independent driver of emission reductions. Please send your questions following the presentations via the chat. We will make sure to reply to them after this webinar. The second half of this webinar will explore through an expert panel debate the potential revisions of the CII regulation and upcoming initiatives to the IMO, which could, over time, make the short-term measures more robust. With this, I would like to introduce you to Camille Bourgeon as the first speaker. Since 2017, Camille has been working in the Marine Environmental Protection Division of the International Maritime Organization. His current role focuses on climate and clean air policies and regulatory developments for international shipping. Before joining the IMO, he worked in the French Maritime Affairs Directorate, dealing with safety of navigation, search and rescue, and prevention of pollution from shipping activities. Camille, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ludovic. I hope you can hear me well.
Yep.
Thank you very much. And thanks to the Global Maritime Forum for this invitation. Greetings from a largely sunny London today. And indeed, I'm happy to provide a bit of a background information on the short-term measures and their review. And I think we need to start by recalling that in 2018, the IMO member states adopted an initial greenhouse gas reduction strategy, which envisaged a reduction of the carbon intensity of international shipping by at least 40% in 2030 compared to 2008. After the adoption of the strategy, member states embarked into translating this into mandatory regulations for ships. And this resulted in the adoption in 2021, in the middle of COVID, actually. All this was done virtually. Adoption of a package of measures, the basket of short-term measures, which entered into effect in 2023, and which really aim at reducing the carbon intensity of shipping as envisaged in the strategy. So 2023, it means we are still in the early years of implementation of this framework. I think we need to keep that in mind. And we're actually undertaking lots of efforts in the IMO Secretariat to ensure the consistent implementation of these regulations, in particular in countries with less capacities, in developing countries in particular. And we are of course aware of the feedback that come regarding the implementation of these measures. And in parallel, we also the IMO member states embarked in a review process, which was envisaged when the measures were adopted. So before turning to this review process and where we are today, I have a few slides to recall what actually are these short-term measures very quickly. So maybe we can turn to the first. And let's not forget that the short-term measures are not only the CII, but it's also this energy efficiency existing ship index. It's a goal-based energy efficiency performance requirement for existing ships, which is pretty much applying the EEDI requirements that were initially designed for new ships to the whole fleet. This was designed as the technical component of the short-term measures, and the aim is really to make sure that there's a level playing field between older tonnage and newer tonnage, and avoid that in situations where higher speeds would be encouraged in the markets, newer ships would be penalized. So we've seen that most ships have used engine or shaft power limitation systems to comply with this framework, but also a number of ships using energy saving technologies. So this is the technical element of this short-term measure. Another element, next slide please, is the SAMP. Let's turn first to the CII, just to remind everybody how it works. It applies to all ships of 5,000 gross tonnage and above. It's a rating system from A to E based on the actual fuel consumption of ships. So we have one building block, which is the IMO data collection system in place since 2019. And we're using this to calculate this operational energy efficiency metric, the carbon intensity indicator, where you have in numerator the fuel consumption by the ship, actual fuel consumption, multiplied by the carbon conversion factor. And in denominator, you will have the distance traveled and the capacity, either gross tonnage for cruise passenger ships or ro-ro ships, or deadweight tonnage for all other ship types. And then you can apply correction factors in some cases. So this is the AER or CIGIDIST. So we don't take into account the actual cargo carried. This would be EEOI. It's the AER and CIGIDIST are the indicators we can calculate with the available data from the DCS. And the aim is really to incentivize operational energy efficiency with a soft enforcement regime in the early years. Available actions for the ships is mostly looking into the operational, the operations of the ship, trim optimization, weather routing, speed optimization, all these things that can be implemented by the shipping industry. So the next slide is about the SEMP. Let's not forget that the short-term measure also has a component of enhancing the existing ship energy efficiency management plan, which is mandatory for all ships of 400 gross tonnage since 2013, and which is really based on this continuous improvement cycle perspective. And it added, in particular, company audits in an ISM type approach to enhance energy efficiency management on board and at the company level. Next slide, please. This is providing you an extract of a report we submitted to the MEPC 83, taking place in a few weeks, with indicative results showing that the carbon intensity of international shipping has reduced by 31 to 36.5%, depending on which measurement method you use, either looking into supply-based or demand-based. And it shows in particular that there seems to have been a greater decrease in carbon intensity in 2023 compared to the previous years, both using AER and using estimated AEOI. And entry into force of these measures, but also factors outside the control of ships, including, as was mentioned by Ludovic, geopolitical events. Next slide, please. So the review, when these amendments to MARPOL Annex 6 were adopted in 2021, the parties agreed to have review clauses both for EEXI and CII to be completed by the 1st of January 2026. So pretty quickly after implementation, we started the data collection, data gathering. Then the data analysis stage took place during MEPC 82 and within a correspondence group, which reported to MEPC 83. We received a lot of submissions on to this review process from a number of stakeholders showing a lot of interest in supporting the improvement of the system. Based on this important amount of inputs, the committee agreed to have a two-phased approach to address all the challenges or the gaps in the system, in particular in the CII that were identified. And so the first phase is expected to end at MEPC in a few weeks' time, when amendments to MARPOL Annex 6 may be approved, and the phase 2 will continue after 1st January 2026. So next slide and my final slide is where we are today. So this correspondence group, which was coordinated by Brazil, Japan, and the European Commission, assessed all these 21 gaps and challenges and provided recommendations for the committee. These documents are all available on IMO Docs as usual, and we are going to consider these in an intersessional working group meeting the week before MEPC, from the 2nd to the 4th of April, dedicated to the review of the short-term measure. And there's a number of outstanding issues which have to be considered in depth, including the revision of the reduction factor for CII until 2030, so from 2027 to 2030. The accessibility of IMO DCS data, proposals for an alternative CII metric. There has been a number of proposals on the table, and this needs to be further discussed. Whether there's a need for additional correction factors as well. There are also proposals that are specifically looking into the SEMP and to further strengthen this system as well. And all this shows that there's a need to actually structure the work beyond MEPC 83, because there will be a need for more time to continue to gather data, continue to analyze the data available, analyze the data that will become available from next year onwards, thanks to an increased granularity of DCS. We'll also be looking into potential overlap with the basket of midterm measures. So all this is on the table, and this review, as was mentioned by Ludovic, is also expected to continue after MEPC 83 during phase 2. So I hope this provides kind of the necessary reminders for everybody to be up to speed and to continue the discussion on the where we are with the review of this short-term measure at the IMO. With that, I'm done. If there's any question, Ludovic, I'm in your hands. Let me know if we should take them now or later.
Unfortunately, thank you very much, Camille. Unfortunately, we don't have time for a question, although I don't know if in 10 seconds you can answer with regards to the phase 2. At what time do you think that this might be finalized? Do you have an idea of this?
So this is actually one of the issues that needs to be discussed during the intersessional working group. We have several proposals for a work plan. We are used to structure the work at the IMO with planning and doing this kind of things. So it's too early to say for now, but okay. I expect this to continue after MEPC 83. Definitely.
Okay, we'll know. We'll have a better idea than in April. Soon. Okay, thank you very much for the presentation, Camille.
Thank you.
Now I will give the floor to Geir Olafsen from Siglar, who will share some insights on the work that his company has been doing on this subject. Um, Geir Olafsen has been active more than 25 years in the shipping sector, building companies and solutions that combines business intelligence with hands-on industry experience. Geir is a co-founder of Siglar Carbon, helping everyone with a stake in shipping to manage and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and costs. Geir, the floor is yours with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ludovic, and thank you also, Camille, for the update. I will try to show you a few examples of our work when it comes to the CII, and hopefully also provide you with some new angles to the CII, which has been, as you know, heavily debated, both the pros and cons. So let me start then with just a small reminder. It's all about shipping. Next slide, please. All about shipping to reach net zero emissions. That's the ultimate goal now by 2050. The CI is one, as Camille mentioned, one of many, many measures in here. So the ultimate goal, keep in mind, net zero emissions by 2050. And I'm going to come back to that with a couple of examples later on. So what is the impact of the CI? I'll show you 4 examples using our data and our methods. So if you go to the next one, this is the historical CI for the larger bulkers and the larger tanker segments. The blue line there is the emissions, and you can see the emissions from the tankers are fairly stable as we estimate for 2024 versus 2023. The bulk carriers, the larger bulk carriers, has had a steady increase year on year. So emissions are sideways or up, not down as what is the ultimate plan of it. If you look at the CII, 2023, we have 18% of the tanker fleet non-complying and 20 even higher number in 2024. And a similar pattern when you're looking at the bulk carriers. So things are so far not heading in the right directions. And of course, there's multiple reasons for this, and the CII alone is not, it's difficult to isolate one element, which is CI, from all the other elements, which are market development, dark fleet, and other factors. One other thing I would like to share with you is Camille mentioned it about the accessibility. So on the next slide, I've called it transparency instead. So if you look at the next slide, you can see, next slide, please. Yeah, here we have compared the number of ships that have reported. Again, we are divided, only looking at the larger sizes, the 20,000 deadweight plus. We have looked at the number of ships providing numbers into the DCS 2023 with other fleet sources. In this case, I've used Lloyd's List, but also if you compare with broker sources, we see the same findings. Roughly 27% of the larger bulker segments and the larger tanker segments cannot be found in the DCS numbers. And that, as an analyst, that is a concern from my point of view, because that makes it also a bit difficult to validate the actual impact of the CII, and also to simulate the changes that are proposed, because when we compare with the 2023 numbers, we don't have the total fleet, and we don't know which ships that have reported versus the ones that don't. So it's very difficult from the outside to contribute. It's very difficult to validate the CI. It's very difficult to simulate the proposed changes. So we would very much urge for more publicity on which ships that have actually provided the numbers, so that it's also easier from the outside to validate and also simulate and suggest improvements. Next slide. This is a bit complex, but I'll try to make it easy. One of the proposals for the revision of the CII is to keep it at sea emissions only. And this here we have compared then the different size segments, the current CII average for each and every segment with an at-sea CII. And you can see there's still size matters. The smaller, the higher rating or value. But what's also interesting to read from it, if you are really into the nitty-gritty details, is that the relative difference between the larger and the smaller are higher. And of course, that is because the smaller sizes tend to spend more time in port, less time in sailing. But if we just keep it to the at-sea CII, then we are more closer to what the ships are actually doing, and maybe it's also more accurate. A very simple analysis. This, of course, the next step would be to do a much more thorough investigation. But just a small taste there. If you look at the next slide, please. This is another example just to illustrate the CII and the impact. And remember, the ultimate goal for the CII and all the other measures is to reduce emissions. This is a short-haul trade. Of course, the short-haul trade where the CII is maybe most misaligned with reality. Here we have a Suezmax doing a short-haul trade in the Americas. 30 plus voyages a year, total emissions 21,000 tons, CII rating E. This is a Suezmax, short voyages. It's very tough to get a strong CII rating. So what would be the alternative in order to get closer to compliance? Well, you could then, rather than having a Suezmax, move into smaller sizes. So let's say on the next slide, please, let's say we replace this ship with 3 MRs. Same volume, but rather than 30 plus voyages, 100 voyages. And emissions, well, they increase from 21,000 tons CO2 to 35,000 tons for this 1 year, transporting the exact same volume, but the CII rating is better. So that illustrates, I mean, the ultimate goal with lower emissions. Here the CII works against that goal. Just to illustrate the weaknesses with it. So what is the key here when we look forward? And one key word here is, what is efficiency really? And how do we measure ships' efficiency? And the key question then is, if we go to the next slide, please. The key, okay, sorry. Let me just summarize the weakness with the CI. This it was a different order. Then the next slide is okay, please. If you jump another, So the key questions when it comes to the CI is really what, and efficiency is really what is work done. The weakness with the CI today is that it is incentivized just for the ship to move, and preferably for the ship to not have cargo on board, because if it's in ballast or not having cargo on board, it consumes less. So it's sort of counterintuitive. But for us moving forward, if we can have a consistent definition of what is the work done really here. And another input from our side is maybe the CI in the current state is grasping too wide, because we are looking at the efficiency where we're looking at efficiency at sea and in port combined, where the CI sort of disadvantage the port calls. So maybe one idea here is to keep it separate, and that is of course one of the main suggestions that are on the table as we understand it as well. But finally, and this is more our wish, the strong benefit of the current or of the CI system is that it is very simple to apply. A to E rating, everybody can understand that. If you have a D and an E, you need to take measures, or the owner needs to take measures. Very simple. Let's keep it that simple. But of course, it is a balancing act between keeping it simple and keeping it fair across the ship types, across the trades. And we have seen a lot of patching on the CII so far, with introduction of correction factors for this and that segment and ship types. So we don't have the full answer for it, but please keep the ambition to keep the CI simple. That is vigorous, because if it's simple, then it will also be used. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation, Geir. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. You raise a lot of very interesting points. I think a lot of those elements will come back in the panel debate later, so in the second half of this webinar. But yeah, thank you again for this presentation here. This brings us to our own Arron Welling, meaning that he's a colleague from the Global Maritime Forum. Arron will briefly highlight how his work connects to today's discussion. Arron is a decarbonization project manager at the Global Maritime Forum, where he works on the industry action team. He leads the operational efficiency program, which is focused on scaling efficiency measures within the bulk trade. Some focus areas are on port call optimization strategies and the cultural misalignment between different stakeholders of the value chain. Arron has been working in the shipping industry for over 7 years, where he has experience working at a ship owner and cargo owner within chartering and operations. Arron, with this, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ludovic. Yeah, it's a good place to start by saying that although robust regulations like the CII could be in place, industry bad practices could still persist. So this highlights that there is an ongoing work to be done on the short-term measures and improving operational efficiency. Today in this presentation, I will talk about how the Operational Efficiency Initiative at the Global Maritime Forum is helping to address these challenges, driving efficiency across the maritime value chain. Importantly, many measures can be implemented now as we wait for the more effective policy to come into force. And also these proactive steps can also provide immediate benefits as well that pave the way for long-term improvements. Next slide, please. So let's first look at the potential. So operational efficiency measures can yield a triple win opportunity. It can reduce emissions up to 20%, reduce fuel consumption and operating costs, but it also paves the way for the uptake of more expensive zero-emission fuels in the future. While the transition to zero-emission fuels plays a major role in the decarbonization agenda, as we know, its adoption will require time for development and investment. Yet the industry must act faster now to reduce emissions, and this is where operational efficiency plays a key role. Next slide, please. But what are some of these barriers that are hindering these opportunities? Well, in today's shipping environment, operators are often incentivized to sail fast, then wait, rushing to ports at high speeds, only to wait at anchorage. So this approach not only contributes to congestion, but also increases emissions due to the higher sailing speeds. At the same time, terminals prefer having vessels ready and waiting at anchorage as well to avoid terminal downtime. So this sort of reinforces this inefficient practice. These behaviors are driven further by split incentives that have long been built into contracts between owners, charterers, shippers, and receivers. Standardized data flows are also crucial for aligning stakeholders and improving collaboration to reduce inefficiencies. However, inconsistencies in data formats and accuracy can create challenges, making it harder to track vessel operations and performance effectively. This is something that's also been mentioned in the previous presentation as well. Overall, working together with others along the value chain, you can start to have that conversation about how to tackle this issue and align incentives to share the benefits. Next slide, please. Operational efficiency at the Global Maritime Forum is an industry-led initiative that was established in 2021 with GMF as a facilitator. At the time, there was a focus on green corridors and regulation, but several key industry stakeholders came together and wanted to also explore what can be done in the short term. Thus, the initiative was formed. The initiative is comprised of mostly ship owners, operators, and charterers with some ports as well. And the scope is focused on the operational aspect of efficiency in bulk sectors, so dry bulk and wet bulk. The focus in the last couple of years has been identifying the key enablers, barriers, and opportunities of operational efficiency. The next slide, please. And with that, the work of the Global Maritime Forum has had some outputs and deliverables to date. 5 key action areas were identified to rapidly improve operational efficiency. The first one was data collection and transparency. This could be the sea carbon charter or the use of flow meters and performance monitoring systems to gather real-time information on fuel consumption. There is contractual changes, for example, contract clauses relating to benefit sharing or allowing virtual notice of readiness to be implemented without breach of contracts. There is pilot projects, which is demonstrating and testing what is feasible for projects like just-in-time arrival and other port call optimization strategies. There is the full value chain collaboration. This could be working with ports, terminals, and cargo owners to address these issues together. And finally, there is culture and leadership. And this could come in different ways as well, but there could be alignment of different departments or teams internally, incentivizing employees to change habits, or also internal training around efficiency. So these 5 key areas can be implemented now to reduce emissions while the industry waits for effective policy measures to come into force. The initiative also produced a report where 26 companies submitted 73 efficiency measures across these 5 action areas, where most of these submitted actions relate to data and transparency, and the least actions were related to pilot projects and the full value chain collaboration. So this showed that gaps still remain and must still be worked on. Specifically, collaborating with the full value chain, such as ports and terminals, is very important because they can help with information on berth availability and port operations, which then in turn allows for better coordination and planning to enable ships to optimize their speed and minimize waiting times. Without tackling inefficiencies in port operations, the transition to zero emission fuels will be more costly and will be more challenging. In addition, port optimization as well is important regarding the CI performance as well, as we've already explored in the last few presentations. Equally, pilot projects are essential in identifying the challenges, testing solutions, and demonstrating the commercial and environmental benefits. Expanding those pilot project testing will be key to refining these best practices and scaling effective strategies. Next slide, please. So given what we know regarding the gaps that still remain, there's been a key development in the initiative at the Global Maritime Forum to direct the focus from analysis to delivering concrete action. This way, the areas that I've just mentioned on pilot projects and the full value chain collaboration can be further explored and improved. These potential work areas are focused on port call optimization and as a pilot project. This will involve working in a consortium of key stakeholders. Within this pilot project idea, we'll incorporate these 5 action areas that I've mentioned. But what is important as well, that the project must promote scalability and share learnings. It must be transparent as possible, sharing what went well, but also what was challenging and difficult to pass on those critical lessons. So today I've shown you a snapshot of some of the efficiency measures that can be taken today to reduce emissions. However, there are still barriers in place. It's not an easy road, as we all know. And overall, only through collaboration can the industry ultimately unlock the potential of operational efficiency. After all, shipping decarb is a systemic challenge that should be solved with multilateral solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arron. Very interesting also to hear you saying how important it is to also find a way to integrate port efficiency through short-term measure regulation. There was in the previous presentation the idea, and it is an interesting concept with the philosophy to keep it simple, to take out the fuel consumption in the port, but then how to deal with the port efficiency is also something that we need to discuss. So interesting discussions ahead of us the coming years. And with this, sincere thanks to the 3 speakers for making the time to join us and providing this rich and insightful content, which brings us to the second half of the webinar, which is the panel discussion. And before starting the discussion, I would like to introduce the panelists. We first have Natasha Stamatiu. Natasha is the Environmental Defense Fund IMO Greenhouse Gas Lead, where she focuses on EDF's engagement in midterm measures. Her work aims to ensure that the transition to greener energy sources not only mitigates environmental impact, but also promotes equitable practices and environmental justice. Hello, Natasha.
Hi, Ludovic. Hi,
Hi.
everyone. Thank you for having me.
Hello. Then we have Avram Gelegenis, Superintendent Engineer at Diana Shipping. Avram is a naval architect and marine engineer graduate from the National Technical University of Athens and has been working in various roles within the Diana Shipping group of companies for the past 10 years. Amongst his various responsibilities, he is also the point of contact of the technical department for issues surrounding the environmental part of the company's ESG-related practices. Hello, Avram. Good to have you in the panel.
Good evening, Ludovic. Hello, everyone.
Then we have Daniel Baccarolo. Daniel Baccarolo is the head of regulatory affairs at the Merce McKinley Center for Zero Carbon Shipping, where he leads a team working together with policymakers in developing regulations that will decarbonize the shipping industry sustainably by 2050. The team main areas of focus are with the EU and the IMO regulations. Daniel has been working in the maritime segment for over 15 years, where he spent time in different classification societies, such as Bureau Veritas, Lloyd's Register, and also the American Bureau of Shipping. Hello, Daniel. Good to have you here.
Hello, thanks for the invitation. Good to be here.
Thank you. And then we have Andy Wybro, hope I pronounce it well, a lead regulatory specialist at Lloyd's Register. Andy has over a decade of experience in regulatory and IMO settings. He previously worked with the UK government as the head of the UK delegation to IMO on various subjects and is currently with Lloyd's Register focusing on regulatory developments related to decarbonization and future fuels. Andy is an IX representative, which is the International Association of Classification Societies at the IMO, to the working group on greenhouse gas reduction from ships. Hello, Andy. Good to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's start with the first question. And my first question goes to Daniel, which is how effective do you think the current CI regulation is in driving energy efficiency and decarbonization in the maritime sector? And what are, according to you, its most significant limitations? What do you think can be done to improve it? And maybe you can also share some insights on what the center is planning to do in this regard in the future.
Yeah,
so
thanks.
With this, Daniel. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the question. It's quite a wide question.
Yeah.
I think we had some insights from the previous presenters of what has the CII possibly driven. I mean, some reductions in CII, in AER, and EOI. I think it's hard to know today with the data that is available if how much of those reductions in emissions and improvements in the AER or EOI are due to the CII itself. I mean, there were other things at play, so it's difficult to assess. In the project, we have a project, actually several projects in the center, but the CII has been a focus here in the center for at least 3 years, because I've been here for 3 years and have been always working on this topic. And one of the things we assess is that there has been impact. I mean, through our partners, I think the key things that they brought back to us is that as it was said, the CII is easy to understand, the A to E, right? These colors, so it's kind of easy to relate to. So because of its easiness to relate to, I think it has driven more attention towards energy efficiency, or at least try to understand why the vessel is A, why the vessel is E. So in itself, this is a positive thing, because people started to pay more attention to the drivers for certain ratings, even though we started to complain about the CII, I see, because I cannot control the port operations and so on. So it has driven these increased dialogue, and of course, because of that, we saw as a feedback that there has been increase in terms of digitalization, so that they collect better the data, so that they can understand better the drivers. It has brought more awareness inside the companies in terms of energy efficiency. So the cross-department discussions has started to happen, at least to try to explain what was happening, for good or for bad. And also we saw, at least the perspective is that, for instance, cargo owners started to use all the CII as a point of discussion in the charters and the shipping companies. But of course, it has some issues. And the issue is because what has been what we try to do. Shipping operations is quite complicated. We have different types of ships. You have different types of operations. Some ships, they have they load their own cargo. Some others rely on the port, and sometimes they operate in an area with a lot of waiting time and so on. Some vessels they go into this mode, like in the trunk business, for instance, that are like on the hook waiting for a call. Some others are like long time planning, like they can plan all the protocols and so on. So it's very complicated business in a way. And we try to assess all these complications into one specific single metric. And of course, then we started to see influences in those metrics coming from all these things that have an influence. So this is in itself, it was a good thing to try to do that exercise. It has brought good things, good discussions, as I said. But at the same time, it started to show the limitations because it's hard to summarize in one metric, right? So that's where all these things about correcting the metric or correction factors and so on. The other one is the SEMP. I think it's good to say that the CI is mostly enforced via the SEMP. And today the SEMP it could be more stringent in terms of its enforcement as we see it. So in the center, we're trying to find new metrics or new ways of regulating specific actions or specific parts of fuel consumption. So we have been providing indications on how we actually can have a CII metric that is more targeted into propulsion, how we can actually regulate the other parts like port stay, auxiliary loading, different metrics in different ways, and how we can actually bring the SEMP into the picture of improving the auditing schemes, improving, what we put in the SEMP, how we track the things that we're trying to implement and so on. Because the SEMP is about actions. So we're trying to make sure that the SEMP actually tracks the actions. And then, it's more robust. So hope I can answer the question with these elements.
Yeah, the question, I know it covers a lot. It's quite a broad question, but with this, and this is very helpful. I mean, we don't have, no one has the answer for the moment. There's no silver bullet, but okay, it's interesting conversations ahead of us, I think. And with this, Natasha, what is EDF's view on this? How effective do you think the current regulation is in driving efficiency, and what are, according to you, its most significant limitations? And also, what do you think could be done to improve it?
Thank you, Ludovic, and thank you to Camille, Geir, and Arron for their very insightful presentations that are helping to frame our discussions today. Indeed, the CII aims to drive energy efficiency and decarbonize the maritime sector, but as it is now, its effectiveness remains questionable due to several significant limitations. Firstly, the ambition of the regulation is relatively low, with relatively lenient targets and a lack of meaningful enforcement. Although theoretically it is designed to push vessels towards lower emissions, the absence of real consequences for poor ratings weakens its impact. CII's biggest limitations are not necessarily equation related, but more consequence and implementation related. Ships rated D for 3 consecutive years or E for 1 year are only required to submit a corrective action plan, which is not even evaluated or judged, and there are no penalties for continued non-compliance beyond reputational risks. This undermines the incentive for significant operational change. Some vessels will achieve an E rating regardless of what they do, and may as well therefore completely ignore the legislation and pollute at will. Other vessels are so efficient that even if they steam at full speed, they will not fall below a B or C rating at worst and can also ignore it as a result. The only vessels that need to concern themselves with CII as it currently is set up are those with a low B or C rating. Those vessels can remain above a D rating by reducing their speeds, and to a far lesser extent by reducing their time in port. Just want to note that port stays have a far lesser impact on CII rating than they are getting attention for. Mathematically, the difference between a 10 and 20-day port stay over the course of a year of trading is almost negligible. From the perspective of ship owners, so far, from what we've heard, most of the effect of CII has been one of perceived fear. Owners don't seem to want their fleet to have a poor rating in case there are any commercial consequences in the future from charterers not wanting to fix ships with a poor rating. From what we've had, the only step some owners have taken in this respect is to reduce speed, consumption, warranty in their vessel descriptions. Most of the time, they do get charters asking them to warrant faster speeds, but due to the current low freight rates, meaning voyages work out better in any case if vessels slow steam, they haven't had much pushback from charterers. But it is really important to know that we have not yet gone through a period of high freight rates, in which case, for sure, they would be penalized for not allowing their ships to steam at higher speeds, which would prompt them to have to reconsider risking poor CII ratings in order to achieve higher time charter rates. Another major limitation is the overlap between CII and the proposed GFS. This redundancy creates regulatory uncertainty and allows for delay tactics as stakeholders wait to see how these overlapping measures may evolve. The prolonged and unclear review process of the CI revision further weakens its impact as well, as it leaves the industry uncertain about the future direction of the regulation. But perhaps the most critical shortcoming is the lack of transparency and accessibility of CII, and that was raised in the presentation just earlier. The current IMO DCS restricts access to data, limiting the ability of stakeholders, including policymakers, researchers, and even ship owners themselves, to independently assess the effectiveness of the regulation. According to our recent CE Delft study that is meant to be published any day now, increased data accessibility could enhance the credibility and enforcement of CII by allowing stakeholders to verify compliance and identify inefficiencies in the system. So in brief, the CI regulation has sparked some investment shifts and operational adjustments. It lacks the enforcement mechanism, transparency, and emission that is needed to drive meaningful decarbonization. So without significant reforms, which would include stricter compliance measures, enhanced data accessibility, CII is unlikely to be a major driver of maritime decarbonization in its current form. But we do at EDF have a lot of hopes for it, and that's why we dedicate a lot of our time to contributing to the correspondence group for the revision of the measure, because we do believe that it has a strong potential to really drive decarbonization and energy efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natasha. That contains a lot of food for thought, what you just said. I'm happy this is recorded so people can have a look at it afterwards, because you made a lot of interesting points as well, especially also what you say on the port stay impact, which is, according to EDF's analysis, relatively low. It might be the case. But okay, let's not go into this now. I have questions for the other panelists as well. Avram, as a ship owner with 38 vessels in the dry bulk segment, how effective do you think the current CI regulation is in driving energy efficiency? And also, what are its most significant limitations? And again, what can be done according to you to improve it? The floor is yours, Avram.
Hello again, Ludovic. Well, to put it simply, from a ship owner's perspective, we definitely believe that the CII framework is a step in the right direction. And it most certainly promotes energy efficiency and decarbonization within the industry. To begin with, we trust that the specific framework did more or less act as a forcing hand for owners and operators to come forward and assume their responsibilities towards the ongoing climate crisis. And at the same time, it applied significant pressure on all stakeholders to act as needed in a prompt manner so as to remain commercially viable. The mere fact that existing vessels are the ones that need to improve led to the development of a whole market around performance-enhancing solutions. And we have seen quite groundbreaking approaches on this specific matter. This drive to improve within the maritime industry would simply not be there in case this new set of regulations were not enforced. As a dry bulker company, we have faced our own set of challenges in order to remain compliant, especially given that for older vessels, we often have to commit on solutions for which the ROI does not make any particular sense, and that is an issue we very often struggle with. At the same time, though, we must admit that the effectiveness of the specific framework is challenged, mostly by its one-size-fits-all approach, which can be problematic at times. The current formula, as described already, does not account for key operational challenges that we are facing, such as trade routes, port congestion, weather conditions, consumption related to cargo discharging via our own means. And that's just to name a few of the various external factors that fall beyond the control of vessels operators, especially for a company operating in a liner charter scheme, where all control of the vessel is handed over to the charters. Based on this, most would agree that the CII framework should be changed, but as already correctly pointed out by our fellow panelists, this is a really complex topic, which is easier said than done, since refining the approach in such a way so as to include ship-specific factors could lead to an introduction of a new set of challenges in terms of standardization, enforcement, and transparency, and potentially even take us a few steps back from where we stand today. Furthermore, if the formula differentiates too much between vessel types, we are also facing the risk of ending up reducing the current incentive for a fleet-wide efficiency improvement, which we trust should be avoided in principle. Trying to sum up now, there is surely room for improvement, but the key takeaway should be that we need to find the right balance, a balance that ensures fairness and practicality while still driving meaningful decarbonization across the industry. So if we want to see the CII work not only as a short, but also a long-term sustainability tool, we need to ensure we strike this balance, and we believe this should be the main focus of the IMO working groups. Thank you, Ludovic.
Thank you very much, Avram. Also good to hear you say that you are also saying that CII is a step in the right direction. Thank you. Okay, Andy, the floor is yours now. With I don't know if I need to repeat the question again. Maybe we can start. Thank you.
Yes, if we're looking at potential for improvements in the CII, as we saw in Camille's great overview of the short-term measures, including the CII, the current metric or the formula is a measure of carbon dioxide per unit of transport work, and we've everyone so far, including in the presentations and in the panel, has been highlighting that what is transport work and within the context of CII. The most widely reported concern that's gone into the short-term measure review is the favoritism, let's say, towards ships on short voyage. There have been multiple studies done that the IMO has received where there are comparisons between similar ship types and in some cases sister ships that have operated differing trade routes. And because of that, even though the ships have the same technical characteristics and are being operated by the same company, some are coming out A and B rated, some are coming out D and E rated, and that is purely down to miles traveled in a year, as the component of transport work at the moment is carrying capacity, so either in deadweight tons or gross tonnage, depending on the ship type, and miles traveled in the year. Because the metric is so sensitive to miles traveled, we see in the data a wide variety of ratings coming up for, as I say, for ships of similar characteristic. And that issue is exacerbated when you consider that the factors affecting miles completed in a year are often not in the ship operator's control. And again, I'm going over things that have already been touched on. So things like congestion in port, etc. So to overcome that, it was alluded to, I think, in the presentation by Siglar, that one of the proposals on the table is to redefine the metric to be one of capturing efficiency on voyage time only. And in that way, you could focus purely on what is in the ship's control. So how is the ship being operated from leaving port A to port B, and only looking at that envelope of the operation. Now that might work for some ship types that are doing traditional transport of goods. That may not work for cruise and passenger ships, where they're not transporting goods and their work is often undertaken alongside while they've got passengers on board. And we've seen other proposals to have a bespoke metric for cruise and passenger ships, using hours in the measure of transport work. So that could be hours where there are passengers on board or similar. And then finally, there's a philosophical question around energy use for cargo maintenance, loading and unloading, and the associated emissions that come with that, and whether they should be accounted for or not. So on the one hand, you could say that that energy is not part of transport work. It's not part of fuel being used for propulsion power, and therefore that should be excluded from the CII. And we've seen a variety of proposals coming into the short-term measure review for additional correction factors to cater for some of that. And on the other hand, you could say that actually that is part of transporting that cargo. There's energy required for maintaining the cargo, keeping it in a certain condition. So sort of summarizing some of that, it's not entirely straightforward what the direction of travel should be, but there are many possible solutions on the way forward. And one thing I would reiterate that a couple of other of the panelists have mentioned and was in one of the presentations is around keeping the CII framework as simplistic to implement as possible is useful both from a classification society's perspective and an administration perspective in the verification activity and keeping that within the necessary timeline, but also from a ship operator's perspective in the amount of administrative burden there is in preparing for compliance verification. So if we add hundreds more correction factors to the table, the system becomes more complex as opposed to keeping it all within a metric.
Thank you for this, Andy. Yeah, I think a lot of what you said shows that in the future discussions, we maybe should agree more to disagree because of the complexity of the issue. So there's no silver bullet for this. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. I think that's my personal opinion, but at a certain point in time, that's I think where the compromise might lie, in not finding the perfect formula, but at least something that everyone can agree on, and then move on. So to keep it simple is something that to keep in mind. This brings us to the second round, where I have two specific questions. Actually, one question dedicated for Natasha and Daniel, because you're also very much involved in the midterm measures discussions. And the question is, Natasha, first to you, do you think the midterm measures alone could, and you already alluded to the GFS discussions, do you think the midterm measures alone could be a better approach to incentivize efficiency improvements? And if not, why not? Or if why, why? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ludovic. Well, there is a reason why there was a divide between shorter measures and midterm measures. If we want to achieve the intermediate targets of the IMO, we need to reduce emissions in the short term, and solely relying on the midterm measures would not allow that to happen. It is highly unlikely that the midterm measures would achieve the IMO's GHG strategy striving targets, especially 2030. Of course, the extent of the efficiency improvements that will be achieved within the midterm measures will depend on the final design of the basket of measures, which is not finalized yet. Hopefully will be soon. But it makes this question fairly tricky to answer. But whatever is decided, there is still a need for a recalibrated CII as a long-term tool to help improve energy efficiency, taking into account well-to-wake emissions. If calibrated properly, CII can lead to less demand for fuel, meaning immediate cuts in GHG emissions from fossil. And there's also an aspect of CII that shouldn't be ignored. The fact that it can lower the overall cost of the transition through lower demand for the more expensive new fuels that will come up on the market. There is, understandably, a worry that decarbonizing the international shipping will place inappropriate economic burden on those countries least responsible for the climate crisis, but that are also the most impacted by it. This is another reason why the CII is important in the short term and beyond 2030. It alone has the potential to drive the kind of shipping change, mainly slower speeds and uptake of wind propulsion, for example, that will minimize the cost of decarbonization overall. CII offers substantial potential to improve energy efficiency, offer emission reductions beyond clean fuels, and incentivize the technologies and operational measures, especially for short-term emission reductions. As I said earlier, we don't know yet what we're going to get in terms of the basket of measures, but whatever will pass through is highly unlikely to reliably deliver the same results that a recalibrated CII would. Depending on the outcomes of MEPC 83, the extraordinary negotiations, the CII will probably need to add on and synergize with the midterm measures. That's likely to happen. So relying only on midterm measures only risks delaying action and making short-term measures necessary. We need a combination of both, really.
Okay, thank you very much. We only have 8 minutes left. Daniel, you're still there because I don't see appearing you on screen anymore on the bigger screen.
For some reason my Zoom shut down.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I'm back.
We'll only get to the second round of questions. So Daniel, for this also to you, do we think the midterm measures alone could also do the trick, or do we need both?
I mean, the center, we try to answer questions like that through the basis of an analysis and data insights and so on. So if we're still working on that one, but I think we have sufficient evidence from all our work that we're doing that we do need focus on energy efficiency, or we need regulations that will drive energy efficiency as their focus, right? Not as by consequence. Of course, depending on how your business is structured, and there are many ways of structuring a shipping company business. It can be a solely charterer, it can be only a ship owner that charters out, it can be owner, charter, and the whole thing. So of course, for a company that owns, operates, spends the fuel, sells the transportation, if you're increasing the cost of the CO2, you will try to minimize that cost. But then if you are a company that is only owning the asset and charters out and has no responsibility about the fuel and so on, then you can ask a question, does that company has incentive to invest in energy efficiency technologies? Because, it's not this company's responsibility to the expenditure of the fuel cost and the expensive fuel that will be incentivized by the midterm measure. So I think we still need energy efficiency dedicated regulations on the table. That's for me something that we need to focus. Of course, the question comes, what are these? And now we have the timeline to work towards 2030. We have the CII, we have MEPC 83 also discussed the reduction rates from 27 to 2030, potentially some revisions. We're talking about the SAMP. But one thing that I think is quite good is that there were some proposals put to MEPC 83, or more specifically to APE1, by some member states on what could look like the review of the short-term measures. And I think if you're looking through it, actually you see some common elements, because they're talking about, in that plan, about EEDI, they're talking about CII, they're talking about the SAMP, they're talking about all the elements of MARPOL Chapter 4, and that was like very nerd in terms of regulations, but so and if you see it in terms of timeline, they're going all the way up to 29. So the question that I think we're working with is like, what are the types of energy efficiency regulations that we will need post 2030? So that movement is quite good, because as much as I feel that we need energy efficiency dedicated regulations, I see in the discussion in the IMO the same motions happening, like this focus in terms of keeping the focus on energy efficiency regulations. And yes, I think the fuel transition is not going to happen immediately. It will take time to put in place the production facilities for all these sustainable fuels, or the e-fuels and so on. These will be expensive. We have been doing quite a lot of analysis on that in the past. We have done one very nice analysis that has been one of our drivers for us to keep focus on energy efficiency, is that for every $1 that you invest into energy efficiency on board, it means $10 less needed investing in the fuel production on land. So I think energy efficiency makes it all less costly in the long term. And then if you look in 2030, just to agree with Natasha, yes, energy efficiency will be one of the main drivers to meet the 20 to 30%. So that's why we are always aiming to get the best out of the CII to make it really drive energy efficiency, operation energy efficiency. And we are already in the center trying to think about, we have this phrase in our mindset in bringing it to the ways of working the center, the projects that we're doing now. What's going to be after 2030, because we're going to need things that will drive energy efficiency. And I think the CII has brought a lot of good things into this because we started to see behaviors. We need to adjust the speed, or we need to focus into how much fuel you're emitting for keeping the cargo cold or keeping the cargo heated, or for port stays and so on. And then they started to think, okay, maybe we can have dedicated regulations that would target each specific component. So how can we have a dedicated regulation for port stays to minimize the fuel consumption or the time at port? How can we have dedicated regulations to auxiliary load? The CI, as we see, might cover the propulsion. So I mean, these type of discussion that was initiated by the CI is quite good. So
thank you, Daniel. I'm smiling. I think we would need a separate webinar to discuss all these things. But thank you very much for your answer. We still have Avram and Andy. Avram, do you have a specific question related to the Sea Cargo Charter, where signatories, both charterers and ship owners, report the EEOI, which is the Energy Efficiency Operational Indicator, which takes into account the actual cargo transported. The guidelines of that regulation were already approved at the IMO back in 2012. As a member of the Sea Cargo Charter, your organization reports the EEOI, which is calculated differently from the CII. Why this approach, and what benefits does the Sea Cargo Charter framework offer to to Diana Shipping? Can you give some insights on this?
Of course, thanks, Ludovic. The Sea Cargo Charter acts as a framework that brings together owners, operators, and charterers, amongst other stakeholders, for the first time under a shared reporting responsibility, where data is transparently shared amongst all parties, with extra verification steps being taken in order to safeguard the quality of the data, as well as the quality of the end results that are produced. This collaborative approach is extremely practical for the industry's decarbonization, as it ensures that all stakeholders come together and align under the same climate-related goals, something that was missing from the industry. The Sea Cargo Charter framework indeed utilizes the EEOI, the carbon instead of the carbon intensity indicator. And as you correctly pointed out, the EEOI is a more operationally relevant measure of efficiency, as it applies a unified formula across all vessel types, linking emissions directly to the cargo transport efficiency. This means that vessels operating under different conditions, such as varying cargo loads, for example, are assessed based on their actual transport performance rather than a generalized rating system like the CII. Furthermore, the framework uses a voyage-to-voyage based reporting platform, which offers and provides a deeper insights into emissions and relevant trends, and enables more meaningful benchmarking, moving away from the rigid annual performance evaluating system. By adopting the EEOI as a key metric, the Sea Cargo Charter initiative offers a fairer and more practical approach to emissions reporting, while still maintaining a strong focus on continuous improvement and accountability. Within Diana, we believe that participating in the Sea Cargo Charter framework has a lot to offer, mainly because through the reporting process, we work towards building improved stakeholder trust, as well as an enhanced collaboration and industry influence by continuously engaging in discussions that affect policy and industry standards, along with all other signatories. This ultimately puts the owners in a better market position against competition and enables us to take advantage of the various resources offered in order to take data-driven decisions and reduce the risk within our own decision-making process.
Okay, thank you, Daniel, to explain the differences a bit with how the EEOI works compared to the CI, and what is the value for you to be part of the Sea Cargo Charter. Then the final question is to Andy. Andy, you only have 10 minutes, 2 minutes or so. So as classification societies are essential partners for ship owners looking to improve the operational efficiency of their fleet, what do you think the role is of class in making the short-term measures regulation more robust? Can you really very quickly give an answer? Sorry to
Yeah,
put
no,
some
that's
pressure,
fine.
but
As people say at the IMO, I'll be brief.
yeah, but they don't.
So when we talk about the roles of the classification societies in any context, they class wear many hats, right? So we, as classification societies, act as recognised organisations, so doing the statutory verification on behalf of the flag the ship is registered with, and we also offer a variety of advisory and consultancy type services. So within assisting ships in operational efficiency, there are the two parts to it. One is on an advisory perspective, where class societies will be doing things like real-time performance tracking of CII performance, voyage optimization to take into account bad weather, etc., as well as the regulatory side of a class society's involvement with a ship operator, i.e. doing the verification of the energy efficiency management plan and facilitating the company audits that Camille highlighted in his presentation at the start. So within that scheme of company audits, we're continually finding or highlighting areas for improvement within a company's operation of their fleet, which then feed back into the cycle of things to do to improve the continuous improvement for those. There are a variety of proposals within the short-term measure review to increase the role of the company audits and the ship energy efficiency management plan, which could see us move to a more holistic system of continuous improvement, which again would be a kind of a partnership between the class society, which has responsibility for those audits, and the company. I could obviously talk for hours, but
no, thank you. Thank you very much. We need to close this panel session. Thank you for your contributions. I know it was really brief. There was a lot of things that we could have discussed further. That's it actually for this webinar. I would like to thank you, the panelists, and the speakers again for taking part in this webinar. I encourage the participants to leave any final questions in the chat before they exit. Thank you to all the participants as well for attending wherever you are. And with this, I would like to then officially close this webinar. Thank you again, and have a nice evening, good morning, wherever you're listening from, and see you soon. Bye.